All right, let's get started. Welcome to our latest webinar about applying for awards. Now, awards are a particular game, and I say this having been asked today about judging a competition. Awards are a game where you're trying to meet the expectations of the people who are judging or jurying the process, and also trying to, at the same time, meet the requirements laid out in the application. Now, I mention this because there is usually a gap between the things that are stated and the things that are unstated expectations. And one of our goals in offering things like this is to acquaint the people who are applying for a program with some of those expectations. And there's some ways that you can look at these expectations and identify them. One is to look at the sample narratives that are provided by a program, and most major awards will provide something there. You can also write recipients, and especially in academia, there's a culture of, oh yes, well, I did that, I can't do it for well, take a look at my thing. For example, if you got a Fulbright Award as a junior scholar, and then you were now progressing towards eligibility in the senior category, then you're not in direct competition with the people who did that. And in fact, for that, you're generally applying for a specific country. So the vast majority of other applicants in any year will not be in direct competition for you. So you can absolutely ask and reach out and say, can you tell me a little bit about XYZ? And when people ask me about the Fulbright program, I'll usually send them, oh, here's a copy of my material so you can see what I did and how I made this point clear, because the sample is really helpful there. So today, we're going to look at the Fulbright Specialist program as distinct from the better known Fulbright Student and Fulbright Scholar program. And if you're interested in one of those, I will call your attention to some of the other webinars we have that delve into that into detail. Throughout this process, I encourage you to ask questions because our goal is to offer webinars that have interest and relevance to you. And there are many cases where we might be able to customize the content based on your requests. So let's take a look here at the Fulbright Specialist program. So our first stop is going to be the Fulbright website. Now, you'll see that it looks a little bit different from the Fulbright Scholar and Fulbright student programs. We have this own special website. I'll go ahead and share that in the chat. And one of our things here is that we are going to be looking at something that you're not applying for a specific period and a specific place. You are applying to a roster from which other places can apply to get you. More about that in a little bit. So let's start here looking at the written requirements. We're going to look at the 4 specialists and the 4 host institutions. So let's take a look here what the eligibility criteria are here. So you need to be a U.S. citizen. No exceptions, must be a U.S. citizen to participate. Now, you must have this significant experience in your field. Now, what that field is varies. Uh, if it's a professional field, other people in the field are markers of success. Academia, a lot of that is probably going to be teaching awards or scholarly publications, artistic achievements. You want to have things to document that, and some of that will be recommendations, some of that will be your resume. You might include something like reviews, for example, or reference the reviews there. Now, you'll see that this is a very attractive option for someone who is an expert in their field who can't get away easily for 6 months, an academic year, because they're running a lab, they have administrative responsibilities, whatever it may be. But being able to travel outside the United States for 2 to 6 weeks at a time for a project, that is actually a really helpful thing because it's something that will fit into some institutions' intersession, some institutions' spring break, or institutions that are on a trimester schedule and might be the period in between those. And for 42 days, that is something that for some institutions that have a winter intersession that you could fit into your break and winter intersession, and you could definitely fit into your summer. So reflecting the fact that the people who are these specialists may have other obligations, which could be family, that make it harder to step away for long periods of time. This is a way for a host institution, to bring in someone for a length of time that's not a full academic year or not a full academic semester. Now, if we look at the ineligibility factors, so you can't have just been employed by the U.S. State Department or equivalent federal agency or one of their immediate family members. That's to avoid the perception of bias. And you can't have been working for, say, for example, the Institute for International Education that is administering something like the Fulbright program. Now, that said, this requirement here is basically in the last 6 years, you must have lived at least 1 year in the United States. So if you've just come back from abroad, you might need to wait a little bit, but that's relatively clear in that, oh, out of 6 years, you can't have spent 5 or more of them consecutively outside of the country. All right. And that's measured at the time of the application. And then there is a list here of eligible disciplines, and you can see it is quite broad. And that if you're looking specifically for English teaching, there's actually a special exchange program just for that that's funded by the State Department. All right, with that in mind, let's take a look at what you have on the host institution. Because to me, the ideal application is when you identify a particular host type of institution or particular institution and work together so that you craft your application for the roster and they craft their application to bring in one of the Fulbright specialists. And we see here that we have a variety of institutions that can bring in someone. Institutions of higher education, government institutions, cultural institutions, NGOs, and medical institutions, including hospitals and public health organizations. So, for example, if you had, say, a university hospital in, let's say, Dublin, and let's say you were looking at the Royal College of Surgeons there, and you wanted to bring in a Fulbright specialist who was a nurse, a public health administrator, a physician, a medical research scientist, that kind of thing. This would be something where, even though they're not a university, which is where most Fulbright scholars go, they would be eligible to bring them in for a project. Now you have some examples of programming, and it's basically something where you are lending your expertise, and that can include both consulting and teaching and curriculum design. Even coming in and lecturing, and it's like, oh, I'm teaching a 1-month intersession course at this other university. Now you'll see that the purpose is not for you to do research for yourself, but if you're assisting with the research program by coming in as an expert, sure. And in this description, the personal is the very important detail here. All right, now we have the project parameters. So all projects designed by host institutions have to be bound by international borders around their country. They can only bring in one specialist per project they apply for, and it has the same length that we were talking about earlier. And a specialist can only come in once every 3 years, essentially. 1 year, do the project, and then 2 years have to pass from when you finished it. Now, there is this variation, the multi-visit project, where you come in more than one time to an institution. And so it has a little formula for eligibility, but again, it's that principle of you must be coming in for at least 2 weeks and no more than 6 weeks at a time. And if you are doing multi-visit, that can be up to 3 visits. So basically, standard is 1 visit of 2 to 6 weeks, and a multi-visit will by definition be at least 2, maximum 3 visits, again, 2 to 6 weeks in duration. Now, what does the host institution need to do? They need to give you a place to stay, things to eat or money equivalent, and transport in the country. So you are not, generally speaking, going to be paying for those out of pocket. Now, in the event that you're, say, in the developing world where that might be more difficult for the university to apply, well, there's a special funding that might apply there. Now, if we're talking, a university in, say, London, they're probably less likely to get that approved if you were applying in, say, let's pick Ghana. Okay, now I'd like you to take a moment here and think about what you might want to do as a project. And we're going to look at some of the examples of what Fulbright specialists have done here in terms of activities and in terms of what they have done before and might be doing now. So we're going to start with this full list of grantees. And I'm going to invite you to tell me a little bit about a discipline that's of interest to you. And you'll see this is very broad. We can even sort it or filter it. So when I was studying Hindi, I had a number of colleagues who were doing agricultural research. One person who was, for example, going to India to work on growing avocados in that particular climate and adapting the local agriculture around this very productive cash crop. Now, that might be your jam. You'll see there are lots of agriculture projects. But if you are working in one main discipline, then we can go ahead and add a filter. Like, for example, we want to have a discipline that is, let's say, anthropology, or let's say public administration. So we can add that filter, and we see there are quite a few here. We have 139, and that includes someone who is working at the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Kosovo. Great. They're still in an evolving thing as a newer country or newer, relatively speaking, independent country where they're working on their constitutional precedent. And so you can see that this expert here was not affiliated with an institution at the time, but they were able to work with them and form this project. We also have, for example, this person here who went from Portland State University in Oregon to the Bavarian American Academy. And so you can see that these are not necessarily institutions of higher education, but we have a court here, we have a school, we have a NGO here, a non-governmental organization. We have, of course, many universities. And so there's a variety of places that you might end up landing for this and lending your expertise. Let's take another look here. So we'll remove public administration. And let's say that we are now looking at a discipline such as library science. I really enjoyed my time on the faculty of the library at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. I think there are lots of fun things that people might do there. And if we search here, let's zoom out a little bit, we can see that we have people going to Switzerland, Kazakhstan, Lithuania, China, the Kyrgyz Republic, the Czech Republic. Okay, this is a huge variety. You can even say, all right, well, let's go ahead and look at what's happened recently. And so we do our sort here, and we see, oh, someone from the Smithsonian went to the Dominican Republic. From the University of Utah went to the United Arab Emirates. Someone from the Los Angeles Public Library went to the Médiathèque Musicale de Paris. Awesome. So there are a lot of things. We're going all over the globe here. Oh, look, here's another one for Kosovo and some other relatively newer countries or newly independent countries. And seems that there's a lot of variety available. Great. So let's back up here now and ask the question, well, what would you want to be submitting? What would you use to make your narrative? And we're going to go ahead and bring up another example here. And while I'm doing that, I want you to think about what you might apply for if you were doing this program, whether it was next year or 10 years. What would you want to be doing, and what kinds of places would you want to be going for that? So think about that. And then we're going to take a look at a actual uh, application essay that was successful and got someone on the roster. So think about that again and keep in mind the period of time, because there are other areas where you might be going here and where you might want to be visiting. And if it's a place you really want to go for a year, then maybe this isn't the program to apply for right now. But on the other hand, it also might be something where you say, I want to do that eventually, and I'm going to work towards that based on what I see. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at this example. All right, so you should now be seeing my screen here, and we can see we've copied and pasted the application text. And you see, all right, those are the same eligibility things required. You're required to attest that. And then there'll be fields where you input, where your degrees are and things like that. And you get to pick up to 5 specializations. And if you're doing something like, say, anthropology, well, anthropology can cover music and ethnomusicology and things like that. Or sometimes it crosses over into sociology and psychology. Or in performing arts, it might be something that checks off multiple things. All right. So now ask the question, why are you interested in doing this? And keep in mind, it's not me that you need to convince. It's the people who are reading the application. And now the criteria they have, okay, specific examples of activities that you may be interested in leading. And partly this is because when people apply to the program as hosts, the people managing the program try and match them up with people who are on the roster. So you are kind of setting the seeds here, help them match you. All right. Now, as the a uh, as we go forward here, there's also that question of what are we going to be uh, looking at next? And so the question is, what kinds of things? And you don't have to have the full details of someone's application to look at that, because we can black things out for privacy. So what kinds of examples would help make your case? And again, we're going to be looking at a successful application. And so we'll see the kinds of things that were listed on this. All right. So, all right. I'm applying to Fulbright Specialist program because I was invited by several professional colleagues who said that they wish to work with me through this. That's a great narrative to make, saying, hey, other people want me. I'm not just doing it because, oh, that would be cool. People said, I want to work with you through that. Then we have a 1-sentence description of some of the things they've done. You can see that this is examples of performing arts. And then they listed some number of examples here. And then a marker of success. They did this thing that is getting done a lot. Then they give it some list of things they've done. We have some of their qualifications in terms of academics and languages, which is helpful because many programs will bring someone in, but it's helpful if people don't need to speak in a non-native language to communicate with them. We have more things that they list, and they say here, oh, I'm eager to do this, and I've done this kind of thing before. And it's not just me, you get access to a network of musicians. And then they list here, remember the prompt here, it says, please include specific examples of activities that you may be interested in leading or completing. And so they give 5 bulleted examples. Now, when we talked about the implicit versus explicit requirements, so the explicit requirement is list some types of activities. But what they don't tell you, but you have the space, and I would strongly recommend using the space to expand on, are what would those things be like? And so they say, oh, a collaboration should be leading to personal and artistic growth, expose people to new ideas and cultural artifacts, produce high quality things, and something that should be shared. And these are important. These are not accidental because although artistic growth may be particular to this application, these are all talking about things that the Fulbright program was explicitly set up to facilitate. If you know the name of the, sorry, if you know the American composer Aaron Copland, whose uh, music is used in so many films, commercials, and in concerts, he was a Fulbright scholar. He went and wrote and performed music abroad, and took music that he'd encountered in his Fulbright term and brought that back to the United States. It's designed to have a bilateral exchange, and this is telling us implicitly that the writer of this is interested in doing that kind of exchange. And then they give some more detailed examples saying, well, I don't know where I'm going to be for this, but here's some stuff that if I was doing that kind of thing, that I might do. So it's not just this general list. They come back with an even more detailed, more granular list of things. Now, it's good to keep track as you go along. Yeah, where are you related to the space limitations? All right, so the next question that I might suggest is, what would you like to do? And you can have uh, some specific projects that you are describing here, or that you are helping someone to describe, but the application itself is relatively brief. Now, I'm also going to show you an example of an email from the program. So one of the great things about the Fulbright Specialist program is that it's not bound to the academic year. You don't have to do the fall application and then start the next fall semester or spring semester. We have a set of multiple reviews throughout the year. And so you can see that we have this description of people applying to join the roster. And we'll just delve a little deeper in here and see that we have, they apply, they need their references to submit things. Once they get 2, it goes to a peer review panel to examine, and they meet 6 different times per year. So let's say you're trying to get ready for May 9th, and that requires both your completed application and 2 reference forms. Let's say you miss it. That's okay. July 11th is also available, and you'd go onto the roster August 15th if you were approved. So it is much easier to work in if you are very busy at those times when the other opportunities are due. Now, I'm going to also share with you an example of correspondence from the program, just so you can see what goes along with that. So ask the question, what would be helpful to you if you were applying for something like this? And as often happens with people who are working at a high level, if you are busy, if you are engaged in other things, and you're not necessarily on top of it as much as you would like. Well, I can tell you that as part of my preparation for this, I went ahead and I signed up for this webinar. I'm sorry, I signed up for the application, And they sent me an email saying, "Oh, hey, for the upcoming deadline, you need to get it in by X." And that's your application and at least two references. And you can see that they kindly sent that 10 days before it was due. So that's very helpful. You get a base point of, all right, to be in the pool by this time, here's what I need to do. And then your application, if the reviewers haven't gotten it in, it'll be held for the future review cycle. So aside from bugging your reviewers, and I heard just got a message that there was an issue with some of the screen sharing, so I'll run through that again. If you start an application, they will send you a reminder about the upcoming review dates. So the next one, they'll tell you, okay, to be reviewed at that time, you need to have your complete application and at least two references. And that if you aren't, even if you get your application in, but you don't have the two references, that's fine. They just hold it for the next cycle, and then you can go bug your reviewers, your reference writers to get those references in. And so I would start earlier because often people do miss things. But in this case, it's something where it's more of a not right now for the review as opposed to, well, sorry, wait a whole year. So with that, let me ask, does anyone have any questions about this? Okay, I have a request here to say a little bit about when this would fit in the timeline. So if you are, say, a um, adjunct faculty person, the requirement is not that you be a tenured professor. And I just do want to clarify that you're not required to be a tenured professor to apply for the Fulbright Scholar Program. What you are required is to have met the requirements, generally a terminal degree in your field, evidence of professional accomplishment, and then having the supporting recommendations that back that up. Now, if we look at the context here, they say alignment of the candidate's background and skills with their objectives that you list in your essays and your ability to do that and quality of the references. So the references are really key because you're not submitting, tons and tons of journal articles as examples of your publications. It's your essays and then how the references back that up. So what makes a good reference? A good reference will tell the people reading it what the writer's qualifications are to give a reference. One of the best references I ever read was written by the director of the President's Own Marine Corps Band. And he said, "Oh, I've played for so many presidents. I have led this group of professional musicians who do all these things. So speaking from there, here's my opinion of the person I'm recommending." It was an awesome reference. Now, you might have a letter that's being written by a dean from your university. And so it would be helpful if they list things like, oh, yes, this department, I have so many faculty, blah, blah, blah. Here's how they relate to it. And, can include things like, oh, they're reliable, they do their work, they're generous, students write them great evaluations. Whatever it is, include it so that your recommendation is grounded. And you can really help your reference letter writers by including that kind of detail. Now, these other bits here, they're often overlooked because you might say, I don't have international experience. Well, but you might know that culture already. You might have worked with people from international backgrounds. Very likely you have if you are living in the United States. You have worked with people from international backgrounds, whether as students, as colleagues, as supervisors. And to make this case that you wouldn't just be going there and doing free work for them, but that there's something that you bring back from the exchange to your institution. And that's, again, something where your recommendation writers can really help you out. If you have been leading change of some sort, if you've been inspiring designing new programs, redesigning things, and show that there's a track record that would show that you've either done this already or have a strong potential to do that, and they're outlining how that is desirable for your institution to have you participating in the exchange. Now, if you have your application approved, you go into the pool. And so now let's take a quick look at the host institution part before we move on to our closing phases. So the host institutions, for them to apply, they apply through the Fulbright Commission or embassy in their country. You know, some countries have one, some have both, and they will have specific requirements. And so we look at participating countries, and let's say I was going back to Mauritius. I lived there, I worked there, I did research, and see, oh, their page, we need to look for that. In this case, if the website has been redesigned, then you usually want to go ahead and search for something like Fulbright or Fulbright Specialist. And if you don't find it, don't give up. Write them and ask. Now, if we look through this, we see we have Fulbright Scholarship that's administered by the Public Diplomacy Program. So if we look at, say, press and media here, you can, oh, looks like they're redesigning it. All right, we'll have to do a little bit more looking. You can get those email addresses directly from the State Department, but their website has been getting updated. So you know, all right, this might take me a little bit longer to get, but you'll be able to get that eventually. All right, let's back up here. And let's say we were looking at, let's pick Germany here. All right, so there's a broken link on the site. That's all right, because we can look at it and we can see, oh, yes, we just take that out and now we have a full link. Now it happens to be a link in German and a broken page. So again, we're looking at this in advance because websites do fall out of date. And so we'd want to write the Fulbright program here. So we got their contact info at the bottom and say, hi, I was looking for the sites for these places. Your website is out of date. Could you please let me know? And again, that's part of their job to maintain the website. You let them know, oh, hey, this is missing. They can help connect you. And you can also do research on your own. All right. Because those two examples were down, let's go ahead and then just look at the frequently asked questions, because we have this helpful, what do first? Find your Fulbright Commission or U.S. Embassy and write to them. The eligibility, it is much the same as we looked at earlier. Universities, government bodies, cultural centers, medical facilities, NGOs, and similar organizations. If you're a for-profit organization, if you're engaged in political lobbying, like for a political party, not so much. But there's a broad eligibility there. And then to look at these requirements, for here we see that, oh, yes, you have to have the projects that are suitable. And this is reiterating what we saw already, and being able to prepare to host or apply for host funding. So it's a two-step process. They apply, you apply, and you can apply with wanting to work together in mind. Doesn't guarantee placement, but if they write a specific requirement list that sounds an awful like you, and the people maintaining the roster say, this looks like a good match with these people. Awesome. Pretty good. Got some good chances there. All right. Well, if we have no further questions, we'll wrap things up for now. This is part of a larger series of webinars that we have. If you're wondering if we have a webinar related to the thing you're doing, you can always send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu, and we can send you a link to the relevant things we have. We have a writing webinars archive page that you can search, but we realize that that's a lot for some people. Just ask. And if we know that you're interested in something and we don't have it yet, it might be something we add to our next list of webinars. You can also get feedback on an application materials in progress or complete by going to my.acu.edu, selecting Online Writing Center, and from the groups page, and then following the instructions to make an appointment. I will just as an aside mention that I saw a fox running past the parking lot. So if that's something you believe in as in science, it's a lucky evening. So uh, take a chance. And the question was asked, will there be a recording be available after this? Yes. Generally, the recording should be posted to the Online Writing Center website within 48 hours. You can also type your email address in the chat, and I can add you to the list to get a copy of that. So just either look on the Writing Center webpage, let's say by Wednesday morning, or you can go ahead and just type your email address now and I'll add you to the list. And I'll get you that link before we wrap up. And I've gone ahead and shared that in the chat. And to the person who typed their email address, got you. And great. Thank you for joining us. And feel free to visit us again for another webinar. But for now, have a good night.